All right, Sadia.
Introduce myself now.
Yeah, we are live right now.
Okay. It says off air for me, but okay.
Oh, it does? It says live for me.
Alrighty, we'll figure it out soon. Hi everyone, my name is Sadia Arshad. I'm a GATE scholar from APIASF. Okay, there we go. So hi everyone, my name is Sadia Arshad. I'm a GATE scholar from APIASF. I earned the GATE scholarship in 2011, and I recently completed my Master's in Public Health from Boston University this past May. And so this webinar is going to be talking about GRE prep and how GMS can help you with GRE, with prepping for the GRE, and also supporting and finances for the GRE because it is a bit expensive to take it. So the GRE waiver is available through GMS. It is available online, and Melissa will talk to you about how to access it online because it used to be hard copy, but now it's all online.
Fabulous. Okay, so my name is Melissa Jordan, and I'm a senior relationship manager at GMS headquarters. And Sadia was correct. You can receive a fee reduction waiver, and all you have to do is submit an email to gsi@gmsp.org. And once we get your request, we will start to process your fee reduction waiver, and we will reduce your fee by 50%. So you're just going to send a generic email. My name is Melissa Jordan. Here's my GMS ID. I am requesting a fee waiver, and then someone will respond to you and we'll start the process. And it shouldn't take any longer than about 2 weeks. So give yourself about a 2-week time frame from when you want to start or when you want to sign up for your GRE. So that's it. So I'm going to turn it over to the man of the hour, Jay, who is going to give us all of the knowledge that he has about how to get your score higher on the GRE, which I know that I need because I didn't do very well. So, Jay, go right ahead.
Thank you, Melissa. Really appreciate it. I will pull up a PowerPoint here, hopefully, and take you through what I will try to give as the best 50 minutes or so of GRE information that I can give. Let me ask Melissa, can you see my screen?
Yes, I can see your screen.
Okay. All right, so let me go through the PowerPoint, and if you have questions, there's an opportunity to type them in, and we'll try to get to as many questions as possible. I'm also joined by my colleague Akil Bello, and we're having trouble figuring out how to give Akil access so he can speak, but hopefully Akil will have a chance to answer a few questions also in the course of the webinar. Let me get right into it. I want to review with you who takes what test because that way you'll be a little more clear on the landscape of graduate and professional admissions testing. The GRE is required by most competitive master's and PhD programs. Many MBA programs now accept the GRE, although the GMAT is still the dominant admissions test for MBA programs, but just wanted you to be aware of the fact that many MBA programs now accept the GRE. I have CBT in there because the GRE is a computer-based test, and what that means is that it is a test that is like a pencil and paper test just put on the computer screen. In other words, you have a section of, say, 20 questions. You can do the first question or skip the first question and skip the second question and come back later. You can move around in the section on the screen just the way you could with and can with a pencil and paper test. The LSAT, in case some of you might be interested in the LSAT, I know most of you are probably interested in the GRE, but I'll make a few LSAT and GMAT comments along the way. LSAT is still a pencil and paper test required by all ABA-approved law schools. And the GMAT is, as I said, the primary admissions test required by most MBA programs. It's a CAT test, which stands for Computer Adaptive Test. And just very briefly, what that means is a CAT test is there's a question on the screen, and you must answer that question to get to the next question. You can't skip questions. You can't move around within a section. So if you're taking the GMAT, the test actually controls what happens more than you do. And if you're taking the GMAT, you'll get used to that style, so it's not a big deal. It's just different from the GRE. So I'll make some comments about grad tests. And if I make a comment about a grad test, that comment applies to all three of these tests. And most of my comments on this webinar will apply to all three of these tests. So, what do the grad tests measure? What do the GRE, LSAT, and GMAT measure? Let me share with you my opinion of what the grad tests actually measure. Do they measure how intelligent you are? People have different opinions about this. My opinion is no, they don't. Do these tests, the GRE, LSAT, and GMAT, measure how well you'll do in graduate or professional school? Actually, the answer is no. They do help a little bit in predicting first-year GPA. Now, that's not something trivial. I mean, that means something. It just doesn't mean very much. So that those of you who might think, oh, well, I can find out whether I'm graduate school material by seeing how my GRE score is, that GRE score will not tell you how well you'll do in graduate school. It just helps in the prediction a little bit of first-year GPA in graduate school. So that connection between a GRE score and graduate school success kind of doesn't exist. Do the grad tests tell you how good you are? Do they measure how good you are at the grad tests? And the answer, surprisingly, is yes. In fact, that's what they do tell you, and that's all they tell you. So if you know someone with a high GRE score, are they smart? Not smart? Well, you don't know. What you do know with a high GRE score is they're good at the GRE, and that's all you know. Conversely, someone who has a modest GRE score. Smart? Not smart? Maybe, maybe not. You don't know. The only thing you know with a modest GRE score is someone is not great, that person is not great at the GRE, at least not at that time, but that doesn't mean they can't get better. What it means is not at that time, they're not great at the GRE. So if you have a great grad score, it means you're very good at the test. If you don't, take steps, and we're going to talk about doing smart preparation to improve your score. That's the primary intent of this webinar. So, the GRE. GRE was revised in 2011. I took the first revised GRE like 8 days after it was released so that I could see what it was all about. The GRE score scale since 2011 has changed a little bit. The scores range from 130 to 170 for the two most important sections. That's verbal and quant, and sometimes you'll hear me say math instead of quant. Quant is quantitative, it's math. It looks like math. I don't know why they don't call it math, but sometimes I will. So there's verbal and quant. Those are the most important sections. Analytic, you get a separate score. They're essays, less important section. You don't want to blow it off, but it's less important. Now, the way to think about 130 to 170 is a national average score is about 150, maybe a little higher. And if you're familiar with the 200 to 800 score scale on the SAT, and that score scale used to apply to the GRE, that you can convert the 200 to 800 to 130 to 170 in the following way. Drop the 0 off of 200 to 800, that's 20 to 80. Put in 1 in front, 120 to 180, and shrink it a little bit. 120 to 180 goes to 130 to 170. So it's a 120 to 180 just shrunken a little bit. It's the same score scale with modified in that very, very slight way. So, GRE is verbal and math, quant, no science. How much harder is GRE math than SAT or ACT math? A little, a lot, or really a lot? So when I ask this question with live audiences, there will be some students who say raise their hand for a little, some students who raise their hand for a lot, and a few students who raise their hand for really a lot. And the answer is, it's kind of a trick question, none of the above. GRE math is actually slightly easier, only slightly easier than SAT or ACT math. And you may be wondering, why is an admissions test for graduate school easier in math than the admissions test for college? And the reason is that if you think about most people taking the GRE as college juniors or seniors or college graduates, most of those people haven't had a math course in 3 or 4 years. So if GRE math was really, really hard, most students would do dreadfully on it. So it's not really, really hard. It is challenging, and it can be particularly challenging for the people whom I just described who haven't had a math course in 3 or 4 years. So let it be known that GRE math is challenging, but in a comparative sense, not very. And if you get ready and prepare yourself properly to take GRE math, you'll be fine. Now here's a quick breakdown of the GRE, and is available on every GRE-related website you'll look at. What I'm going to try to do, and this is the last piece of kind of generic, easily available information everywhere that I'm going to tell you tonight. The rest of the information is information that I think is really, really important for you to know that tends to not show up anywhere else. So when you go looking around for other information, and you see that what I'll be telling you later is just not something you can easily find. But this is everywhere, so I'll go quickly through this. First 2 sections are, it's called analytical writing. It's actually typing, because you're at a computer and you're typing an essay. So analytical writing should be analytical typing. And you can see it's a 45-minute essay and then a 30-minute essay that you type. Then come the more important sections. Excuse me, verbal, 2 sections, 20 questions per section, 30 minutes per section. Quant or math, 2 sections, 20 questions per section, 35 minutes per section. They're not in that order, they're mixed up. Then there's going to be a 5th section in the verbal math domain. It's either going to be verbal, it's either going to be quant, one or the other. The 5th section is for you. It's an unscored section, and you don't know which one it is. At the end of the test, you'll say to yourself, oh, I had 3 verbal sections. Well, one of them was unscored, and you won't know which one it is. The final section is called research. I've never spoken to anyone who's taken a research section. Apparently, relatively few students get it, and it's a section where they tell you this section doesn't count. So you'll be told that, and so you can do with it what you will. But just be aware that you'll have one section that doesn't count, and you won't know which one that is. So the rule of thumb is do your very, very best on every quant section and every verbal section. And on one of them, you will have wasted your time because it won't count, but you don't know which one, so you have to do your best. So a couple of survey questions. I'm wondering how many of you are college grads, rising seniors, juniors. If we had a polling capability, I would ask that question. And for those of you who took an official test already, a GRE or one of the others, there are probably a couple of you on the webinar, and I'll make some comments about repeat testing a little later. This is a question I like to ask in a polling context if you did intensive preparation for that test, because I'm going to be advocating here that you do intensive preparation to get your best GRE score, and we'll talk about what that means. Now here's a question that I love to ask with live audiences. It's may seem a little outside the box, How many of you played at least one full season of a high school sport? Taking you back to high school for a moment. You were in the school play, the orchestra, the school paper, the yearbook, anything where you went after school for 2 or 3 months for an extracurricular activity. Probably most of you did that. Sometimes if you worked a job, you didn't have time to do that. But if you did that, I'm going to connect that up to GRE prep later. You'll see. But let's get into a few questions that you might have right at the start. And remember, we'll want you to type in some questions you have. And Melissa, hopefully you'll interrupt me at some point with questions that you're reading that are submitted. But here are questions that you might have. Let me hit the very common questions about the GRE right up front. And this, most of what I'm saying here applies to the LSAT and GMAT also. Question you might have is, do I need to do GRE test prep? And the answer is yes, if you want to get your best score. If you don't care about getting your best score, if you want if any random score will do, and every once in a while you will be talking to it. One of you may have talked to an admissions director who says to you, look, if you apply with your grades, all I need is a GRE score. It doesn't matter what it is. Just please take the GRE. That happens on occasion, not very often. Most often, you will want your best GRE score to place you in the most competitive position for the most selective school that you can get into, and to access things like fellowships, which usually require high GRE scores. So if you're in the category where you need or want to get your best GRE score, the answer is yes, you need to do GRE prep, and I'll give you a GRE prep plan. Another common question is, what is a good study plan? I just said I'll give you a good study plan. How and when should I study? I'll make some suggestions. How often should I take practice GREs? I'll address that specifically. When should I take my official GRE test, and how many times? I'll talk about that also. And if you need a fee waiver, remember you should make the contact that you were told about right at the beginning of this webinar, and do that early. I think Melissa said allow 2 weeks. I would allow even more than that. Make sure you have a fee waiver in place early. So if you have any other, these are the most common questions I get right at the beginning. If you have any other questions, type them in and hopefully we'll get to them. So I'm going to very quickly do one screen on the nonprofit that I run, just so that you can see where I'm coming from. I do a lot of affirmative action advocacy. In fact, I was on the phone and email most of the day today talking about a couple of different amicus briefs, which are friend of the court briefs in the Fisher Supreme Court affirmative action case. So I'm up to my ears in affirmative action advocacy. I do workshops for grad admissions officers. There are some of the schools at which I have done test workshops for grad admissions officers. I have collaborations with a bunch of organizations. MLT is Management Leadership for Tomorrow. PPIA is an organization that prepares underrepresented minority students for graduate degrees in public policy. The NABC is the National Association of Basketball Coaches, the men's college basketball coaches. I'm their affirmative action and SAT consultant, and we're doing an amicus brief in the Fisher affirmative action case. I've been a test critic for over 20 years. Now, my day-to-day work is helping students like you on this webinar get your best scores, but I also lobby and advocate for policies that will do away with or reduce the weight placed on these tests. So my position is that the tests aren't good, and you can think they're good or not good. That doesn't matter. What you need to do is get your best score. And if you think they aren't good, if you agree with me, that's fine. You still need to get your best score. So they're not good, but they are incredibly important. and this is about getting your best GRE score. So we're going to go right to the trenches at this point. I'm going to show you my favorite GRE test-taking technique. This is something I can show you quickly. Unfortunately, it doesn't apply to the LSAT or the GMAT. It only applies to the GRE. But I have time to only show you one technique, and I want to show you this one. And the reason I'm showing you this is you'll get a sense of how powerful test prep techniques can be. And so you need and want to learn them. So what I'm going to show you is a text completion question. And I have counterintuitive in parentheses because the method that I'm going to show you is a counterintuitive method. It's not necessarily one that you would naturally think of doing. So here's a very difficult text completion question. You can see how hard it is. It's a sentence with one blank and then answer choices. You want to pick the answer choice that best completes the sentence. You'll remember this kind of question from the SAT if you took the SAT. It was called the sentence completion question there. It's called text completion on the GRE. So you're probably sitting there thinking, boy, if I can figure out this code that he's using here, I can guess the right answer. Well, there's no code. And I'm telling you, because I wrote this, there's no code. I've taken out the words. I've substituted just random X's. There's no code. I took out the words so that you'd focus on the structure here because the technique involves the structure. And if I had words there, you'd be reading the words. So here's the technique. Well, before I explain the technique to you, let me explain to you how most students naturally do this kind of question. Most students will read the 24 words in the question, will substitute in the answer choice A, so they will read 25 words with answer choice A. Then they will read 25 more words with answer choice B, so they've read 50 words. 25 more with C, total of 75 words. 25 more with D, 100 words. 25 more with E, 125 words. I'm not reading 125 words. My method involves reading 35 words. So you have a choice here. You can use what might be the natural method of reading 125 words, or my method of reading 35 words, my counterintuitive method. My method is faster. I think it's better. And in a tightly timed test, you want to get correct answers as quickly as possible. So if you're curious about my method, let me explain what it is. My method is that I want to pick the word, pick my own word to fill in the blank, but I don't, and this is key, I don't want to be influenced by the answer choices. I just want to read the sentence and plug in my word. So when this question pops up on the GRE screen, and I had these questions when I took the GRE in 2011, when it pops up on the screen, I say to my eyes, don't look at the answer choices because I don't want to be influenced by them. I want to figure out my own word. So by saying to my eyes, don't look at the answer choices, what do my eyes do? Well, they do what your eyes will probably do. They look at the answer choices. So good thing I have a left hand because I physically take my left hand and I put it up on the screen and I block the answer choices because I don't want to be influenced by them. Read the sentence, write down with my right hand, since I'm a righty, I write down the word I fill in the blank. Okay? Then I take my hand off the screen. I actually don't touch the screen because I don't want to, put smudges on it, but I hold my hand over the answers so I can't see them. And this is what I did when I took the GRE. Then I take my hand down and I compare my word to A. So I'm reading 24 words, plugging in my word, 25 words. I compare my word to A, 26, 27. I compare my word to B, 28, 29. I compare my word to C, 30, 31, my word to D, 32, 33, my word D, 34, 35. I'm reading 35 words, okay? And I'm getting the correct answer quickly, safely, reading fewer words, getting the correct answer a high percentage of the time. Now that sounds great, and I've just explained it to you, but there's one issue, and that is you can't do this really well right now. You need to practice it because it takes a certain degree of skill and practice to get good at writing the word that you fill in the blank. Because if you're not good at that, this system doesn't work very well. So you've got to get good at that through practice. All right, let me take you, so I've explained it to you, you understand it. You won't be really, really good at it unless you practice it. So let's practice it on one question. So here's, I'm going to show you a question that I found on the GRE website. And this is the text completion question. And so that you don't have to smudge your screen, I'm just not going to put the answers up. I'll block them off for you. So the issue is to fill in the best word here, and then we'll compare it to the answer choices. So I'd like you all to write down the word that you would put in that blank. And I'll be quiet for 10 or 15 seconds to let you do that. Now, Melissa, are you there? Do you have any questions for me?
I am here, and we do not yet have any questions on our social media platforms.
Thank you. Okay, hopefully everyone has written down a word. Let me use the word that I get very commonly. I've done this a bunch of times with live audiences. A word I get is gradually. And it happens to be an okay word. It's not a great word. So if gradually is your word, let's compare it to the answer choices. So I'll pull up the last answer choice first. Gradually and slightly. Well, they're kind of close. Maybe we'll leave that in. Gradually and precariously. Well, no. Precariously means dangerously. Gradually is way different from that. That's no good. We would eliminate that. We would cross that out. Gradually, and one thing to notice here is if you read the sentence with precariously in it, it doesn't sound so bad, but it's not close to the best word. We're trying to find the best answer here. So that's why it can be confusing if you read the words in the sentence. So gradually and precariously, two different, that's gone. Gradually and irregularly, pretty different, that's gone. So we've eliminated two of the three. E, we're going to hang in there with. Gradually and imperceptibly, that's pretty good. So leave that in. Gradually and permanently, no, those two are different. So we only have two that are close here, B and E. And so my okay word, gradually, helped us out quite a bit. We pretty quickly got down to two choices. The very skilled and very prepared test prep, the person who's prepared well for the test, would put in a little different word here and would look at this sentence and would say, well, the key factor here is not know in the back half of the sentence. I'm just going to put not know in the blank. Now, it doesn't quite fit as a part of speech, but that's the concept. And so you don't even have to invent your own word if there are very appropriate words already in the sentence, and there are here. And if you put not know in that blank, well, between slightly and imperceptibly, then you know it's imperceptibly, because imperceptibly means not know, not being able to perceive. Im is a negative of perceiving, so not perceiving is not knowing. It's very, very close, and slightly is okay, but not that close. So I've just shown you the difference between picking an okay word and plugging in something really good. That's how the technique works. So, very important question. How many official GRE tests, and this applies to the LSAT and the GMAT, and I have the word more in parentheses in case you've taken the official GRE already, how many more tests should you plan to take? So I'm giving you a choice of 4 answers here. How many times, or if you've taken the test before, how many more times should you plan to take an official GRE test? Okay, everybody write down a number, and I'll show you the correct answer in just a moment. Come on, write it down. Write something down. Okay. Correct answer is, and this may be a little bit of a surprise to some of you, once. Prepare in a smart way, get it right the first time. Or if you've taken it before, get it right the next time. You've probably heard that before in your life, get it right the first time. And it applies here, and I'll elaborate here just a little bit. There is a caveat, but have a fallback in mind if you need it or want it. So the way I like to think about this, and the way I suggest you might want to think about this, is you have a target test date, and that's the test you're focused on. You're going to prep intensively for that date, and I'll explain to you what intensive prep is in a moment. And you're going to go in, and you're going to get your best score. And you're going to do so well at that test and be so happy with the score, knowing it's your best score, that you're done. And that fallback test date, which for the GRE you want to be like 3, 4, 5 weeks from your target test date, because you want to, first of all, take kind of a week off and just get out of test prep mode entirely. And then you want to do 2, 3 weeks of refresher prep to get to your optimal point for that second test. So that's the concept of the fallback. You have it penciled in on your calendar. You don't have any conflicts. And if you want or need to take the test a second time, you have that date set aside. Now, there's no sin in taking the test twice or 3 times. By the time you're taking the test the 4th time, probably not doing, probably need to really figure out what's going on. No harm in taking it 2 or 3 times. Better to take it once. Cheaper to take it once. Less strain and stress to take it once. So no harm in taking it twice. Better to take it once. A lot of folks take these tests more often. Why? Well, I don't know. Did they decide not to do their best the first time? There are a lot of people who who kind of think that just by going in and taking it a bunch of times, that's a substitute for actually preparing, and it's not. And I'll talk about that in a moment. When ideally should most students take an official GRE, LSAT, or GMAT? Pretty clear, spring as a college junior, after doing some prep. And if you're beyond a college junior, if you're a senior or a graduate, then as soon as possible, but after doing intensive prep. Why? Because scores are good for, almost always good for 5 years. Like 95% of the time, scores are good for 5 years. There are exceptions on occasion. But if you look at or ask admissions offices whether they'll take a 4 or 5 year old score, almost always they will say yes. Were you advised by a campus advisor to take tests spring of the junior in college? Probably not. Very few students are. The colleges kind of really dropped the ball on this. So I am now going to show you my single most important slide that I'm going to show you in this webinar. So if you're taking notes, now's the time to jot down a few items. Again, this is the single most important slide that I'm going to show you tonight. It's how much grad prep that I recommend. This is the test prep plan that I'm recommending to you. And these are minimums for the GRE, LSAT, and GMAT. And this is whether you're taking a test prep course or you're doing self-prep, and I'll talk about the differences between those in a moment. These are minimums. I like to see students preparing by doing 2 to 3 hours a day of high-quality test prep, 5 to 6 days per week, and you're fortunate that I believe in a day of rest, for 7 to 8 weeks, right up to the test. That is a good test prep plan for the GRE. That's a good test prep plan for the GMAT. That's a good test prep plan for the LSAT, but I'm noticing that students are starting to do 10, 11, 12 weeks are becoming more and more common for the LSAT. But for the GRE, certainly this is a really good test prep plan. Forgot something. 4 to 5 practice tests, not more than 1 per week. And these are full practice tests taken under as close to actual testing conditions as you can get. So that when you're taking the practice test of a GRE practice test on computer, for example, you don't want to be sitting on your kitchen table or in your bedroom. You want to go to a library and pick a corner and take it on your computer there, because you're in a place that's quiet but not completely silent. It's a little strange. It's a little different. Don't go to a familiar library corner. Go to one that you're unfamiliar with. And that creates a situation that's a little bit closer to the actual test-taking environment. So that's what you would do. Now, if you do less than this, you're simply going to get lower than your best score. I have students who say to me, Jay, I can only do 4 weeks. That's all I have. That's all I can do. I can only do that. And my response is, okay, you'll get a better score than you otherwise would at 4 weeks. You won't get your best score. That's just the way it is. So that's the kind of reality that you have to deal with. Now, if you do a lot more than this, you risk burning out. I say these are minimums. You can do more, but if you do a lot more, you want to be careful. Now, for those of you who are thinking, my goodness, that sounds like a lot of time, let me make several comments. Number one, if you're a performing artist, you're a singer, you're an instrumentalist, you're a dancer, you're an actor, and you have an important recital or performance coming up in a month or 2 or 3, there's something that happens. It's called rehearsal. You practice, you rehearse. If the performance is important, you want your performance to be as good as it can possibly be. And that requires weeks and weeks of rehearsal. What you see on your screen is rehearsal for the GRE. It's the same thing. If you're more familiar, if you're less familiar with performing arts and you're not a performing artist, maybe you're familiar with athletics, then you know that teams get together in high school, in college, for 4, 5, 6 weeks of practice before the first official game. Why? To enhance skills, to increase proficiency, to perfect in as much as possible athletic performance. That's what you see on the screen here. It's the time spent, if you were an athlete, perfecting, enhancing and perfecting your skills so that on the day of an important performance, you perform, excuse me, you perform at your best. So, if you took the test before and you didn't put in this kind of time, you didn't do a good test prep and you didn't get your best score. This is rehearsal, this is athletic practice for competition, and it's a little more than half a season of a high school sport, which is why I asked you at the beginning to put this in some kind of context. It's a serious commitment of time, but it's not going to kill anybody. And you all did double this in high school for all kinds of stuff that was a little less important often than the GRE will be for you. So keep that in perspective. And as you're working through your test prep, if you're thinking, oh my God, this is tough, this is a lot, it's a little more than half a season of a high school sport. It's not going to kill you. Do it. Accept it. Do it. More is not always better. There's a visual to kind of cement that in your mind. Hopefully that animal got down pretty quickly. That card is going nowhere. More is not always better. Better is better. Smarter is better. Not necessarily more. That's my burnout slide. Now this is the second most important slide I'm going to show you in this webinar. It involves an acronym that I've developed where the P stands for something, the A stands for something, the C stands for something, etc. And I like the acronym PACES because in a tightly timed test like the GRE and the LSAT and the GMAT, pacing is very important. You will develop an ideal and optimal pacing for yourself through your test prep and through your practice, so that when you get to the official test and you go into the official test, your pacing will be down. You will know exactly how fast you need to go to get a lot of questions right, but not so fast that you're making careless errors. That's why pacing is so important. So let me take you through the acronym. And remember, this is the second most important slide I'm showing you tonight. The goal is to be able to honestly say, right before you walk into the official GRE, that I had a good preparation plan. This P stands for plan. And you've all got that because I've given it to you. Everyone has a good preparation plan. You know the kind of time and energy you need to put in. So you can all honestly say, as you go into the GRE, I had a good plan. Now here's a key letter is A, acted. I carried out my plan. I acted on my plan. I implemented my plan. I actually prepared intensively and thoroughly. Having a plan is lovely. Not implementing your plan doesn't get you where you want to go. So you have to do your plan. The C actually stands for two things, confidence and calmness. You're primed for your best effort because you're confident and you're calm. Well, why you're confident? You're confident because you have a good plan and you did it. You're calm because you're really well prepared. And why are you well prepared? Because you implemented your really good test prep plan. So you're ready. The E in PACES stands for energized. I'm ready mentally, emotionally, and physically to do the 3+ hours of my best work. So what that means is you have to watch your sleep a couple nights before the test. You know, watch what you're eating, get a little bit of exercise, and wake up that morning of the test just at your physical best with as much energy as you can possibly have. And that will be different. For some of you, that will be 7 hours of sleep for a couple nights. For others, 7.5, others 8, others 8.5. Whatever puts you in your most energetic state, that's what you need to do. And you need to walk into the test room with your best energy. And the S in PACES stands for secure because you have a fallback. You'd rather not use it, but you have a security blanket. You have that other test date a couple weeks down, several weeks down the road. You have penciled in. You can go back in and take the GRE or the GMAT in your backup test date if you need or want to. So you should feel secure. Now, it's much trickier for the LSAT because the LSAT is pencil paper and there are fixed testing dates. But for the GRE and the GMAT, they're given almost continuously throughout the year on computer, so you can set up a test date 3, 4, 5 weeks after your target test date. You can set up your practice test date. So if you can go into the official testing center for your GRE or LSAT or GMAT and honestly say that you've done PACES, you're there, you've got all of these letters covered, you're just setting yourself up to get your best possible score, one and done. Go in, knock it out, be done with it, get a great score. And I'll tell you, I've talked to bunches of students who've done that, who followed my advice, and they are the happiest test takers I've ever met, the one and dones. Again, if you have to take it or want to take it a second or third time, not a sin, but one and done is a beautiful thing. Try to be that person as much as you can. Scheduling an official test. The wrong question is, which date should I schedule a test? The correct question is, which 7 to 8 week period works best as my test preparation period? So you want to look to the best 7 to 8 weeks, and then you schedule the official test at the end of that 7 to 8 week period. So in picking the 7 to 8 week period, you clearly want a period with the fewest obligations and distractions to permit you to do your best test prep with the most time and energy you can muster. And after you pick your 7 to 8 week period, then register for the test. Register early, get your fee waiver thing resolved, and register early for the test for the end of that period so that you get the exact date and the exact location that you want. The optimal way to do this, if you know any college freshmen or sophomores, is to plan to take a light course load the spring of the junior year, a heavier course load the fall of the junior year, and free up some time spring of the junior year to do GRE prep. No one gets that advice on any college campus, so if you know some younger folks, tell them that, and that's a really nice situation when people can do it. So what are my test prep options? And I notice we're coming up on the hour. Let me get through this screen, and then Melissa, if you can jump in and see if we have any questions that can be addressed. There's a whole lot of test prep options, books, but if you work out of a book, if you're doing the GRE, you need questions and practice tests online so that you can be on computer doing them. So learning the methods and techniques out of a book is fine, just you want to do a lot of practice tests on the computer screen. Same for the GMAT. Reverse for the LSAT, since it's pencil and paper, you want to do almost nothing on a computer screen. You want to do almost everything pencil and paper. But GRE, lots and lots of questions and all your practice tests on a screen. Classroom courses are great. They're ones with different perspectives. There are online programs where you can get self-paced instruction, or live online where you have a teacher. It's like Wednesday night at 7 o'clock and the teacher is there with 10 students online at the same time. There are those things that are available. One-on-one tutoring is available, but nobody can afford that, but it's there. I suggest that students try to access a classroom course if you can. They're often expensive, they're sometimes inconvenient. Maybe you can get some funding or subsidy from an office on your undergraduate campus. It's worth an hour or two to check that out. If you can get into a classroom course, do it. If not, you'll be self-prepping. Get yourself a really good book, get access to online questions for the GRE, and you know you have your test prep plan, so you know how to approach it. I've talked about quantity of test prep. Obviously, quality is really important. This is just not about putting in the time and doing it with headphones on, listening to music and eating and texting while you're prepping. No, prepping is about being totally 100% in the zone, focus on the test, learning as much about the techniques and methods that are going to help you on the test as you can. Approach a test as a challenging game. Keep your sense of humor intact, or develop one if you don't have one. If you see a really silly or stupid answer choice to a test question, laugh at it out loud. It's good, it's healthy to laugh at those. Not at the official test, because the proctor will come over and wonder what you're doing. But during your practice, I'm giving you permission to laugh out loud at stupid answers. Be careful of test companies' advice. They're not actually on your side here. So the GRE folks, what they tell you on their website, a lot of it is lame. Just be careful of what you absorb from them. As I said, take a course if at all possible. Try to find some funding. And my dream is that you get a really high score, and then you become a critic of the test, like I am. But look, focus on getting a high score. We can address the criticism later. So I can go to the next screen, but let me just pause. Melissa, any questions that I might address at this point?
So I have a question, actually. I took the GRE
Sure.
about, this time last year. And so my question is, what does a student do when, as you are preparing, you are just feeling totally inadequate as far as knowledge base, right? So you're practicing and practicing and practicing, and you're testing and, doing everything you're supposed to do, but you're just feeling like you don't know the information. Like, how do you overcome feeling like, oh, I feel like I have to relearn all this stuff that I may not have had, classes for a very long time. You know what I mean?
Yes, and I'd love to hear Akil's answer on this also. Let me, if it's possible to get him on. It might not be. Is that Akil? Are you on?
I am.
Great. You want to take a shot at this first, and I'll do it. I'll follow you.
Yeah, I mean, the short answer to it is you relearn it. I mean, that's really what it is. Especially with the math, a lot of the stuff you haven't seen in forever. When's the last time you've had to think about what a prime number is or what multiple and factor mean, right? But the fact that they're going to test it means you have to learn it. So it may take longer than you want. It may be more annoying than you want it to be, but it is what it is. I look at it the same way as learning anything else. I don't gripe and cry because I can't cook, because I've never chose to learn those things. When I'm ready to learn to cook, I will deal with whatever it takes to learn to do it, right? And that's the GRE's the same. If they can test something, you can learn it. It's just a question of time and direction and possibly instruction to help you get through it as efficiently as possible. So you buck up, you deal with the frustration, and you take the time to learn it.
That's excellent. Let me break that down into two separate pieces, math and verbal, since those are the two most important sections on the GRE. If you're weak in math, and if you're struggling in math, there's a great book called Math Smart 2. It's by the Princeton Review. And it covers all those important things that might not be that you should have learned in middle school and high school that might be rusty, you might have forgotten, or perhaps you didn't really learn them well in the first place. And I'm talking about things like fractions and the ability to manipulate them, decimals, percents, ratios, basic Algebra 1 concepts, basic geometry concepts. It's hard to prep for the GRE and do GRE questions if you have those kind of weaknesses. So you might want to get a book like Math Smart 2 or something similar and brush up on your math skills. Verbal is a little trickier because there aren't those sort of modular skills that you can focus on specifically. Verbal is about strength of reading and vocabulary. There are good vocabulary books, so if you find that in working with the verbal section you're struggling with not knowing the meanings of words, and the GRE has some challenging vocabulary, then get yourself a good vocabulary book and brush up on vocabulary. And these two things, the Math Smart and vocabulary, another good Princeton Review book is Word Smart for vocabulary, but there are lots of vocabulary books. Those are the kinds of things that you do, Melissa, before your GRE prep. So this kind of 8 weeks intensive GRE prep that I'd like to see you do at minimum, if you're really weak, maybe you have to do 10 or 12 weeks, but if you need to hit those particular skills, basic math skills and vocabulary, you want to do that before 12, 15, 20 weeks out, before you do your intensive GRE prep. Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense. Very good sense, actually.
Okay.
Mhm.
Any other questions that you have? Should I do one more slide and then
Yeah.
maybe we should wrap at that point?
Yes, you definitely have time for one more slide.
Okay. So how do I prep and how do I start? Let me just give you some basics. Well, you have to decide on your 8-week test prep period. So that's really important. That's the 8 weeks right before the test when you're going to prepare most intensively, virtually every day. You never want to skip 2 days in a row. Remember I said 5 or 6 days a week? Almost every day. And the first thing you actually need to do after you figure out your test prep period is to take a practice test. And in fact, you can take a practice test before you figure out your test prep period. Do that soon. Do it timed. GRE on computer, timed. You can find practice tests at a bunch of websites, PrincetonReview.com and a whole bunch of others. Don't go to GRE.com and use their GRE practice tests because you want to save them for your test preparation. Because they have two really good practice tests on the GRE website. So don't go there for your first practice test. Save those. Go to any other website, take a practice GRE, and you'll get a sense of your strengths and weaknesses. Don't focus too closely on the exact score because they're guessing at the score, but it'll give you a range of where you are, and it will give you your strengths and weaknesses. So that's the first thing to do. Then you want to detail your plan. You have your 8 weeks, have a sense of your weaknesses, what you're going to start to work on. You want to front load your weaknesses. You want to attack them early. You want to stay switching math and verbal for the GRE, for example. And you want a specific schedule of your practice tests, 4 to 5 practice tests spaced out every 10 days to 2 weeks, so you know when your practice tests are. Now, my suggestion is that you alternate topics, and you can do that in a whole bunch of ways. If you have a 2-hour sessions, you can do an hour math and an hour verbal, or you can do math one day for 2 to 3 hours, verbal the next day for 2 to 3 hours. But you want to be alternating back and forth because you want to stay closely attached to both domains. You don't want to do like a week of math and then a week of verbal because you'll be too far away from the other domain that you're not working on. I would suggest don't go more than kind of 2 days math, 2 days verbal, and I think that's even a lot. So you want to keep switching back and forth. And notice I say emphasize, maybe do 60% of your prep on your weaknesses. The reason I say that is we all like our strengths. And if math is my strength and verbal is my weaknesses, I'm going to feel better about working on math, about prepping on math. And I may end up spending a little too much time on prepping on my strength unless I consciously decide to spend a little to make sure that you're not shortchanging your weakness. And you don't want to spend all your time on your weaknesses because you want to build your strengths also. But make sure your weaknesses get adequate time. And let me just quickly deal with this, if I might, Melissa. I work with a lot of underrepresented students. I work with Native American students. I work with African American and Latino students. And what I find is all test takers procrastinate. But the procrastination in the underrepresented minority communities that I've worked with tends to be strong enough that I thought I needed a stronger word, and I've settled on avoidance. What avoidance is a person says, okay, it's October now, I'm going to take the GRE in March, and I'm going to do my prep starting in January, and everything is cool, but I get to January and I say, well, you know, actually I'm going to take the GRE in July. And unless there's a really, really good reason to do that, you may be in an avoidance cycle. And I've talked to too many students who've been putting off the GRE every 5 or 6 months for 5 years. Don't be that student. If you're in an avoidance cycle, recognize it, name it, address it, deal with it, and get over it, because you got to get in and take the test. On average, the tests are skewed against you, accept the challenge, prep harder than others. As I said, beware of the test company's advice. Try to take an intensive course if possible. Think about it as an investment. But if you can't, you know what you have to do, and work hard and beat the averages. So I think that's a good place to end, Melissa, and maybe we can finish with another question or two.
Yep, so I have a question. A scholar is asking, would you suggest taking the subject test, and in this scholar's case, that's going to be physics, at the same time as the general GRE? That's the first part of the question. The second part of the question is, what should I expect from the specific subject test in terms of difficulties, length, acceptable and satisfactory range results?
You know what I'm going to do with that question, and if Akil wants to add, that will be great. I'm actually going to ask that student to email me, and I'll email back because it's so specific, it's not going to benefit most of the people on the webinar, number one. And number two, relatively few students even have to take the subject tests. And let me talk about them generally for a moment, but I'll be happy to answer that student's question via email. The subject tests, GRE has a whole bunch of specific subject tests in math and the sciences and languages and literature, all kinds of stuff. Not many programs require them, and the only way to know whether you have to take a subject test is if your program that you're applying to specifically requires it. Most programs don't. The general GRE will suffice for most programs. Akil, anything you want to add to that?
No, that's about right. I would say most of the answer to those questions is going to come from the school and program they're applying to.
Right.
If the school requires both the subject and the general, they have to take both the subject and the general. I would try not to prep for both at the same time. Ideally, if you're taking a physics test, the math on the general GRE probably shouldn't be an issue. But I would think that what you'd have to do is take a sample test of each, find out where you stand with each, and then plan your prep following that. They're basically different tests. There's not a whole lot of overlap between the two. I teach all the major standardized tests, and I will never look at a physics GRE subject test. I can't come close to getting questions right there, right? So the content is very different, which means hopefully this student has the content for the physics test and its application of it in this particular format. That's the issue. And so they're not, hopefully not preparing for two substantially different things that they don't know the information for. But figuring that out is a big part of planning how you're going to prepare from here. So I would, one, let the school govern what you do, and two, figure out where you stand with each test once you know what you have to take.
Thanks. And as a general rule, I would suggest that preparing for a subject test is probably a 2 to 3 week time frame as opposed to the 7 or 8 weeks that I'm suggesting for the general GRE.
Let me add a little something to what Jay is saying with the preparation. Start your investigation of the test early, right? If I'm thinking about taking the GRE subject test in April, I want to take a practice test now, because you don't want to wait until 3 weeks before the test to take your first practice test and find out whether it was good or bad, right? So the earlier you take a practice test in the comfort of your home or somewhere, you know, like a library, to find out roughly how am I doing at this moment in time, the easier it is for you to plan ahead. Because if you take the GRE today and let's say you score in the 2nd percentile of math, that means that that 8-week recommendation pushes out to 2, 3, 4 months, right? If you score in the 90th percentile, then that preparation time may reduce. So the earlier you get a score and you have an understanding of where you're starting, the better you'll be able to plan what to do next. So make sure you start that prep early, just in terms of, let's take a test and find out where I am right now, and then make a preparation plan from there.
Well, that's excellent, and let me extrapolate upon that for the general GRE. If you're thinking about taking the GRE 6 months, a year from now, no harm in taking a practice test now. In fact, a pretty good idea because it will help with your planning. If you find a real weakness in math, there's a lot of rust in your math abilities, then you can plan to spend a couple of weeks with a book like Math Smart 2 before your GRE prep period. And so it just to know your strengths and weaknesses early allows you to plan much better a test prep experience that's going to work for you. So Melissa, should we wrap it up at this point, or is there a final question?
I think we can wrap it up. I don't see any questions. I'm just going to take a really quick look. I don't see any additional questions. I did send that student's contact email so that you can follow up with them at your committee.
Excellent.
And
although we gave that student pretty good advice here, but certainly we'll follow up.
Yeah, that student is saying that that they definitely have to take the physics subject test for their next step in their educational career. So, yeah, no, I think that this is a good stopping place. Thank you, Jay and Akil. I appreciate you both for taking the time out this evening just to give us some really great information. Jay, as we load up to YouTube and students have more questions, because I'm sure we'll get lots of folks that will want to attempt to watch it or come in on the back end, how can they contact you if they have further questions?
My email is jayr@review, spelled REVIEW.com. And anybody can email you, Melissa, and you feel free to give them my email.
Okay. And if folks have questions and they want to email me directly, my email address is Melissa, MELISSA, .Jordan, JORDAN, @gmsp.org. So that's melissa.jordan @gmsp.org. I wanted to give another reminder about GRE fee reduction waivers. It is a 1-for-1. So once you receive your first waiver, unfortunately, we're not able to give fee reduction waivers every time you take the test. So you'll want to consider that in your planning phases, and if you're going to think that you might need to take it again or know that you might need to take it again, we will only, unfortunately, be able to offer one fee reduction waiver. So keep that in mind. And again, if you have questions about fee reduction waivers, you will want to email gsi@gmsp.org, and we will follow up with you and give you some instructions on how you access the code for the reduction. So, Jay and Akil, did you all have any final thoughts before we sign off?
Not much for me. Good luck, and make sure you don't book a wedding venue before you have met your husband. Don't schedule your GRE test before you have taken, prepared for, and have some sense of what your score will be. I think that's one of the biggest mistakes I see most people making. And if they're going to get one fee reduction for free, only take it once.
Yeah.
You can take infinite practice tests and find out where you stand before you go into the real thing. And the way you score on a practice test, you will not score 600% better on the real test. So take those practice test scores, as the gospel. What was it that the Jetsco said? Our record is what it is. We are what our record says we are. Right? So be clear about what you're doing before you go into the test and spend your money, and good luck.
Fabulous. Jay,
and I think,
did you guys have any thoughts?
My parting,
go ahead.
My parting comment would be to obviously prep intensively, but also be careful. There are very well-motivated people out there who will try to help you and will give you really bad advice. So if you hear anything in terms of advice that you think, I'm wondering, is that right? Will that be helpful, or is that not right, or is that, in fact, stupid, and you don't know, email Melissa. She will forward it to me or to Akil, and we will tell you whether the information you're gathering or whatever you heard is something you should follow or something you should ignore. And again, often really bad advice comes from well-intentioned people who want to help you, but they're just misinformed themselves. So be careful out there.
Thanks, Jay. Sadia?
Well, I thought this was a great webinar. Thank you so much for hosting this. I wish I saw this webinar 2 years ago when I was taking the GRE, because my GRE prep was very rushed, and I definitely saw that on my scores. But like everyone said, make sure you do like set time aside for it, and make sure you actually like review and study and take the practice test, because it is very similar to the actual test.
Fabulous. All right, folks. Well, remember, scholars, if you have questions, you can email myself and I will forward them to Jay and Akil. And if you want to email Jay directly, his email address is jayr@review.com. Thank you all again for logging in this evening and spending some time with us. We hope that this was helpful. Send us some feedback on Facebook and Twitter if this was a helpful GRE review session. If you need more information or if you want to see something like this similar in the upcoming months, let us know and we will do our best to provide content that you desire. All right, thanks guys. We're going to sign off and everyone have a good night. Thank you, Sadia, Akil, Jay. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you. Good night.